anyone. Okay, as I was saying, my name is Lilian. I'm from the Pogo Secretariat. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Nano webinar series. I have checked the registrants list and noticed a few new names here, so I'm not sure everyone knows what Nano is. Very briefly, Nano stands for NF Pogo Alumni Network for Oceans. We are a network of past and present scholars from NF Pogo trainings. Together, NF, the Nippon Foundation and the Pogo Partnership for Observation of Global Oceans provide training for early career scientists from all over the world on observational oceanography. Since 2004, about 450 early career scientists have been trained by this partnership. We have created in 2010, so we are almost completing 10 years. We will complete 10 years in October. We created this network as a means for keeping everyone in contact, not only alumni themselves, but alumni with the organizations and also with instructors. And we develop many joint activities on this network, from outreach activities, meetings, and also research projects. This began in 2012 with regional projects. There were 5 regional projects in 5 different continents where alumni, so past scholars, worked together for a coastal related research project. In 2017, these projects came to an end and joined for a global one. The global research project is NanoDope. It's coordinated by one of our alumni, Dr. Hussein Snafi, who is here today, and I will give him the stage so he can talk a little bit about the project, its activities, and then introduce Dr. Grinson George. Sorry, Hussein, before I continue, I have to say to everyone that this meeting is being recorded. It will be later posted on Pogo's YouTube channel. So if you're not comfortable with having your face or voice recorded, please keep your mic mute and your cameras off. Thank you again. Sorry, Hussein, please.
Thanks a lot, Lika. Thanks for this nice, quick introduction for Pogo and Nano. So as most of us, at least some of the participants in this webinar know, between 2013 and 2017, with the support from Nippon Foundation and Pogo, Nano members successfully conducted joint regional research projects that tackled coastal monitoring at different subjects. For example, HABs, harmful algal bloom, tides and currents, erosion, exotic species invasion, and among other subjects. Ultimately, applying ocean observation for societal benefit. Well, these projects served as inspiration for Nano's newest initiative, which is to have a global project, on a global scale, an effort that started in 2017, and with the main focus of the project being to contribute to the global effort of observing levels of productivity, acidification, and level of oxygenation in especially in coastal zones and nearshore areas where data are rather meager and where the so-called coastal dead zones exist on a global scale. So the NanoDope DOAP, stands for deoxygenation, acidification, and production, have mainly 3 objectives. So the first one is to support in situ measurements of selected essential oceanographic variables at the participant sites, select study sites, then compile the data submitted by the participants into a global database that would be shared among the project participants, but also is meant to be shared with the larger data sharing networks later on. And also, as we have now the Nano, these webinar series, also to provide capacity building opportunities to the project participants on marine data management and observation and marine science in general, either by organizing capacity building events like workshops, or they have these online webinars. And also very important component of the project, and it's very much related to this webinar that Dr. Grisson-George will give, is to initiate and promote outreach and citizen science activities to raise awareness about the importance of marine environment and the threats it's facing. So that's it for presenting the project. So I'll now give the microphone to Dr. Grisson-George to start his webinar, and we would like really to thank him for being here and for being able to give us his time, and the mic is yours.
Thank you, Hussein and Lillian, for giving me a platform to present. Thanks, Nano and Pogo, for this. And before starting the presentation, I remember Professor Dr. Trevor Platt, who was instrumental in establishing the entire network, including Pogo, Nano, and I was fortunate to be part of the first visiting professorship to Cochin at National Institute of Oceanography, and rest of my career is what he taught. So let us come into the seminar. Hope I'm audible to all of you. Can you hear me properly? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you are.
Yes, perfectly.
Yes.
Perfectly.
And you can see the slide.
Yes.
Yes.
Over.
Yes. Okay. So we'll go ahead with the presentation.
So we're still having people joining in?
Yes, but this will last for some time, so you can start presenting. Yeah.
Okay, just maybe, sorry, Grisson, just take 30 seconds. Just forgot to announce the seminar title. So the Dr. Grisson-George will talk to us about his experience with citizen science and environmental monitoring, and he will take the Vembanad Lake as an example. So, Doctor, just a few words to present Dr. Grisson-George to the audience. So, Dr. George is a senior scientist at the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute in Kochi since 2012, and is presently on deputation as senior program specialist in fisheries, Agriculture Center in Dhaka. Well, previously, he taught fisheries science for one academic year in 2003 at the Republic of Maldives, and worked as a scientist since 2005 at the Central Island Agricultural Research Institute in Port Blair, with additional responsibilities as honorary coordinator, CPR Environmental Foundation, and Juliette Massey Honorary Fellow of World Aquaculture Society. Along his career, Dr. George received multiple awards, including the Dr. Rajendra Prasad Pursakar for his best book in agriculture and allied sectors, the Dr. Hiralba Shodhuri, sorry for my pronunciation, and the Dr. Kul Karni for his research accomplishment. Grisson has been involved with Nano-Regional project in the Indian subcontinent between 2012-2016, and now in this global project, so the Nano DOEP, since 2017, along with Dr. Nandini Menon, which is the India's coordinator representative in the project, and of course Nano patrons, Dr. Shubha Satyendranath, And Dr. Greason authored 52 peer-reviewed high-impact research papers, 6 books, 3 edited books, 13 chapters, and more than 100 conference abstracts. So there you go. We have really delighted to have you here with us. And I give you the microphone.
Thanks, Wasim, again for the nice words. Hope I'm audible and most of our audience are also present now. So I'll go ahead with the presentation. The topic is already told by Wasim. Then when this particular topic was broadcasted, one of my friends called me today morning and told like he immediately browsed for what is citizen science. So there can be specialists working in this field also, but there are some generalists who are not knowing about the background, introduction and definitions. So let us check what is citizen science. Coming into the background, the scientific discoveries until 20th century, probably all of us know them and we know what they discovered. The names which are there on the slides, you're familiar with the names, you're familiar with their discoveries, and you know really the science behind their discoveries. So what was essentially different just prior to 20th century and what is different in the 20th century? That is what I would like to say in the first 2 slides. So in the beginning of the, before the 20th century, we had mostly researches which are individual based. You can see like all these discoveries are individual based and they were self-funded. There was no proper organizational or institutional structure or support which was helping them. So this is fundamental to the scientific discoveries. And if you see since 20th century, and I am showing something which is in the last 1 decade, last 10 years from 2009 to 2019, if we look into the prize winners of the coveted Nobel Prize in Science, you will be knowing some of these inventions or discoveries or how the science in this has contributed. But we are not familiar with the persons who are involved in this. The basic thing is like most of these researchers prior to the initial days when science started progressing in, it all got institutionalized. Rather than self-funding, there was organized institutional funding available. And the researchers were working for a problem, and it was not as an individual, it was more as a team. So most of these inventions or discoveries, you can say like it happened as a team. And it is mostly multidisciplinary also. For example, 2009 Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, we know because he is basically an Indian in origin. He studied physics and he got Nobel Prize in chemistry. So that is how science is progressing in modern world. It is interdisciplinary. So there is organized funding structure available, and these funds are utilized for studying science in depth and come out with some possible discoveries or inventions. That's how things are progressing in the modern world. So what is going to be the future of the science? As this phase is coming to an end, now we are going to face another phase where now itself the grants for science is very competitive. We have to fight for the grants, get the grants. Then only we can have a smooth conduct of a research in a particular problem which we have conceptualized. So now scientists or researchers are looking for avenues where they can get their scientific data at the best price. They are looking for data which can come to them at an easier way at the best price. So when we look into the dictionary meaning of the citizen science, it indicates that the collection and analysis of data which is related to the natural world by members of general public. So it's a collaborative project which is done along with the professional scientists. So professional scientists are looking into general public who are again part of citizen science network, and they can contribute to some scientific projects or scientific programs. So if you list the major activities what are happening in citizen science, it is mostly related to amateur astronomy. Even my 3-year-old daughter, she is also fascinated by seeing the moon or star. And this fascination which is there in the starting of the life, it continues till the end of the life. So at times we look at the sky and wonder how beautiful it is. So amateur astronomy is one area where citizen science has progressed well. There are a lot of amateur astronomy groups. Then there is citizen science in oceanography, in which this particular topic which I am discussing is also involved. There is a lot of citizen science related oceanography work happening in marine literature and related aspects. Another major group of interest is on organisms. Like people are interested in butterflies, they are interested in birds, they are interested in corals, they are interested in rocky reefs, which are tidal pools where there are a lot of diverse organisms available. So people have formed citizen science groups which can support such study on organisms. Now coming to applied sciences like agriculture or some interesting sciences like art history, there are also citizen science groups. For example, in the case of farmers, they form collective network to develop high-yielding varieties of seed which can support their farming systems. So it is through a collective effort, and it's a citizen science group which is supporting it. In the case of art and history, in case if you come across a museum piece or an artistic piece, there are citizen science groups which can support you in rightly understanding the value of that particular work. So citizen science network is pretty available, and it is non in informal means. A lot of scientific things are happening in informal ways. We can call it as citizen science, but the organized citizen science group has got its own structure and way to do it. So let us discuss in detail how it is being done. What is the advantage of citizen science? Like a particular scientist, for example, if I am interested in doing a particular measurement in an area, I can do it only in that particular area. From my lab, I have to travel to that particular area and do the particular measurement. But if you can have the same measurement, which is very simple and can be done by local people, they can do this measurements multiple number of times without spending much effort on travel or other logistics. So in my case, I have to travel from the lab, and if the area is 50 kilometers or 70 kilometers away, I have to travel the entire distance, collect the data, come back. And again, to repeat the experiment, I have to travel the same distance. But if there is a localite, if he is given a small instrument for measuring that particular thing, he can do it easily. So measurements in distant areas can be facilitated through citizen science. At the same time, rather than having shorter time series, we can have longer time series, and you can extend the area of interest. For example, in case we have in our network the entire globe or people from different parts of the world, we can have global observations also as part of citizen science. So in general, it is going to be very less expensive because the logistics involved in traveling and other things can be taken away with, other than the true in situ samplings, which is part of a field experiment where we set off for doing the field data collections and all, and the type of logistical problems involved in this. It is going to be very costly, but at the same time, the citizen science data is going to be less expensive because the local people who are in that area is contributing to the citizen science data. Now coming into Vembanad Lake, Hussein was struggling to pronounce it. Vembanad Lake, it's a pretty important, beautiful site. If you are into Cochin or Kerala, you are familiar with this site of houseboats traversing across the beautiful, lavishing water scenarios. So this is one of the important 3 Ramsar sites in Kerala, one of the important 3 Ramsar sites in Kerala. It is the largest lake system on the southwest coast of India. Almost 10 rivers are draining into this Vembanad Lake system. It is representing a drainage area of almost close to 16,000 square kilometers, approximately 40% of the area of the entire Kerala state. We have classified Vembanad as CVCA. It is critically vulnerable coastal area under CRZ notification, Coastal Regulation Zone notification. Coastal Regulation Zone notification is for conserving the particular natural resource or the particular area. But at the same time, when we talk about conservation, this area has got direct impact on the livelihood of the people who are living in and around the lake. For example, if there are 15 or 16 villages, the villagers living in this village directly depend on their routine livelihood activities in this lake. For example, sometimes they may be doing tourism. So tourism, they require the water body. Sometimes they may be doing farming activities. Again, farming activities is directly related to the water body. Sometimes they will be doing fishing. They will be doing clam-based fishery. All such activities, you can see in the next slide, like there are different activities like coastal aquaculture, capture fisheries, rice farming. The Pokali farming is a famous indigenous type of farming mechanism which is seen around the coastal areas, which is the saline resistant variety of rice being happening there. And tourism, I told, houseboats and other things, it is happening all across the Vembanar Lake at different stretches in different intensities. Now, as the lake is there and there is a strong community dependent on it, when people or anthropogenic interference is there, there are a lot of threats. So we have problems of domestic waste, we have problems of industrial pollution. There are a lot of industries located in and around the lake, and they give heavy metals, pesticides, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, etc. to the lake. At the same time, because of the presence of the heavy urbanized community around the lake, we have high nutrient inflow into the lake, and this nutrient inflow is creating eutrophication. Along with this nutrient inflow, what is coming from the urban or rural domestic settlements along the lake, they bring in a lot of fecal contamination. At the same time, because of the heavy nutrient load and eutrophication, aquatic weeds multiply in plenty. You can see a meadow, it looks very beautiful, but this indicates that the particular lake is becoming shallower and shallower and degrading, and finally it is going to become a marshy swamp rather than a flowing lake. So this is what is happening to the lake. So why and how we established a citizen science network? In this, our interest was to have some important scientific data collected through the citizens who are in and around Vembanar Lake. So our first interest was to look into the academic community, because academic community, particularly those who are studying science or practicing science, they will be more interested in supporting the scientific activity. So we approached the different colleges, and around 13 colleges in and around Vembanar Lake, mostly teaching undergraduate and postgraduate programs, mostly in zoology, environmental sciences, and other related disciplines which are close to science. They were rocked in, and we conducted a massive program for training them. So we got an established network through the faculty coordinators. Some of them have joined the meeting also. So these faculty coordinators, along with their students, became the network. So the network is established, but what they will measure? We need some simple equipment which can do some measurements, which can be utilized for monitoring the lake. So the equipment came handy. The equipment which is shown here is a mini Secchi disk. This is a 3D printed Secchi disk. Secchi disk, most of the people are familiar. I'll be explaining it in detail in the coming slides. This particular 3D printed Secchi disk, along with the color code, was developed by Bo. His name is Robert Brevin, and he is part of our project. He is also attending this meeting, I suppose. So he and his brother Tom, both of them together, developed this disk as part of an environmental sciences exercise to teach the students about the relevance of turbidity. So they have developed this disk, and through our project in collaboration with Plymouth Marine Laboratory, we made it possible to arrange the Secchi disk. You can see in the photograph, like our citizen scientists are holding the Secchi disk packets. It is distributed to them, and the network is established. So they can take this small equipment, they can do the measurements, and they can transmit. The third component of this citizen science program is a information dissemination mechanism. So they can enter the data in a small mobile application known as TurbAqua. We called it TurbAqua, turbidity in aquatic environment. That was the meaning of TurbAqua. We coined the name so. So this is a fully indigenous mobile app which was developed by Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute as part of this project. And through this app, they are sending the information to the server of CMFRI, which can be retrieved by the scientists for doing the scientific analysis and finally coming up with positive scientific results. So we, as part of the training which was organized when we established the network, we developed a manual for operation of this mini Secchi disk, and the manual is available in CMFRI ePrints, which can be freely downloaded. The link is also shown here. So in this, we have explained how they can operate this small Secchi disk. There are mainly three things which are coming out of it. When they switch on the particular mobile application for sending the data, they have to fill in some details. When their GPS is enabled, their location is coming to us, and they have to measure something called Secchi depth. So this is a slide taken from the published manual of PML by Bob and team, Robert Brevin and his team. So in which they have clearly indicated how a person can do his Secchi depth measurement. So lowering this particular disk into the water the citizen scientists are able to measure the Secchi depth. Secchi depth is the depth at which the particular disk disappears. So that indicates the somehow how turbid the water is. So this particular Secchi depth measurement is done, and they can enter the Secchi depth value. It is the board level to Secchi disk visible level. So board level to water surface level also is entered in the particular app, and we can really measure the exact Secchi depth. Now we are asking another information called the color. The color in this particular study is having values from 1 to 21. You see the color of the water, it can vary from light blue if the water is deep and the water is not disturbed by any other optical constituents. It will vary from light blue to dark blue to lighter blue. Then if there is some phytoplankton presence, the green pigment carrying organism is present, it will become greenish. Along with the zooplankton and turbidity, it will become yellowish, and the turbidity is more, it will become brown. So these are the general colors what we are seeing in the waters, and depending upon the intensity of the optical constituents, the color varies from 1 to 21 as we have indicated. How to do this measurement is like, we have to bring back the Secchi disk which is lowered and which is invisible. When it is coming to half of that particular Secchi depth, we can see the color. Like in this particular photo, we can clearly see that brown color is very much visible on the Secchi disk. So he can accordingly indicate the color and write and type it in the mobile app. So we get the Secchi depth, we get the Secchi color also. Now this particular data is transmitted to the institute. For transmitting, the mobile application has to be installed from the Google Play Store. It's available in Google Play Store. You can install it. You have to do a temporary registration so that we will know who is sending the data, and the mobile number will be registered in our server also. So a 6-digit OTP number is sent for cross verification, and the app is functional, and the people who are involved in citizen science, they can send their information via this app. So our first step was to really train all these people who are in our social network. So first training we did for the college students and their faculty. And it received much of media attention also, because media was interested in seeing like how the people who are in and around the lake can contribute to the environmental monitoring. And we could successfully complete it, and there was a brochure made. I showed the brochure also. And citizen scientists or the college students and their faculty were equipped for doing the measurement in the Wembanaar Lake. Apart from the student community, we wanted to try it among our different stakeholders. So we conducted a second program in which we invited some of the stakeholders. You can see one of the stakeholders doing the measurement. So they ranged from the fishermen to the boat operators, some of the NGOs who are active in this region, then some other people who are involved in Wembanaar Lake and who are interested in doing such studies in Wembanaar Lake. They came to the forefront and they were part of this network. So this was the second step. But we got a better result from the college students, because they are more young, more active, and more involved in science. And probably their coordinators or faculty members are equally pressurizing them to get some data, so that it will become a real scientific exercise to learn. So a scientist, when he is looking at the lake, probably he is seeing much less, but there are a lot of hands joining him to look into the lake. He can see the lake with a better clarity. So that essential was part of the citizen science program. So what really we gained from this exercise? Establishing a network, developing a small equipment which can suit the environmental monitoring, and we have given to them. And I told what is the measurement, what is taken in this. So really, what is the use of this measurement? Whether we could get some real scientific data out of it. So in the next part of the slide, we will be looking into it. As you see in this particular slide, the first figure, which is the Secchi disk readings, there are two color of dots in the first figure. The one is the red color dot, and the other one is the yellow color dot. So the red color dot indicates the real in situ scientific measurement taken by us, the scientific team. And the yellow color dot indicate the measurements taken by the citizen scientists. So you can tell from the figure like who fared well. Definitely it is the citizen scientists who have collected a lot of information. So when our study was limited to the Vembanad Lake, there were citizen scientists who were taking the information even from the tributaries far away. So it is giving us a better spatial coverage, better spatial resolution. The second figure, the citizen science observation, it indicates the number in which each citizen science is taking the data. So depending upon the diameter of the circle, the frequency is more. You can see the legend. As the frequency is more, the diameter of the circle expands. So at some locations, we are getting better data, and some location we are not getting such a high frequent data, but spatially we have got a well-distributed data sets. So now coming to the next part, how this spatial data is coming in, like how better we can say like this data is useful. I told about the color code which was printed on the small Secchi disk. So similar to the color code which was ranging from 1 to 21, we have got a color pattern from the citizen science data. It is ranging from 13 to 21. This was the major data set obtained. On an average, we got it from 13 to 21. We have information sometimes from 11 and 12 also. So we have observations from 11 to 21 according to the color water, how the water color of the lake is. So if you really look for the color in the lake, it will look like this. Okay, the third figure is really indicative of how the lake color is based on the average data obtained from the entire citizen science programs and our institute programs. Now, what is this indicating? We got Secchi depth, the color code. So Secchi depth is something which can give us the turbidity of the water. Turbidity is maybe because of the suspended sediments. Turbidity may be because of the green color of the phytoplankton which is there. Turbidity may be because of some other material which is there in the water. So depending upon the optical constituent of the water, there can be some turbidity. So we had some in situ measurements. I told about the red dots. Based on the red dots, we could construct a turbidity map based on our CTD measurements, which is a highly precise scientific equipment, sensor-based equipment, which is costing it is really costly equipment. But whereas this Secchi disk, which is a much cheaper equipment, but it also provided very high quality data and a better spatial resolution data. The second or the third figure towards the right extreme of the slide is really indicating the citizen science data, how they contributed to the measurement of turbidity and in the lake. So this turbidity is measured based on a scientific published document, and the Secchi depth we have converted it to turbidity, and the turbidity measured by our scientists using CTD and the turbidity measured by the citizen scientists, they matched pretty well. And this indicates that citizen science can provide good turbidity measurements. Now coming to this color code, what is available? This color, which is the color code, I told about 1 to 21 color codes. It is scientifically known as Forellial color codes. And this color code is matching with the water color. So you can see the different types of watercolor images sent by the citizen scientists to us. So it is varying from 11 to 21. We have got 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. All these color codes were available in the citizen science data which was sent to us. And you can see the matching numbers. So these are the common colors which Vembanad is having. Nothing below 11. It's not so clear. As you know, there is a lot of turbidity, there is a lot of phytoplankton bloom, and how these color codes were useful to us. This color of the water really indicates the optical constituent, what is present in the water. So the color codes, what is available in the Vembanad, it is shown as the pie chart in the middle. The middle figure with the pie chart is indicating how the color code is. So you can see like the maximum is to the extreme turbidity levels, where the brown color is more. You can see almost 28% is in the color code number 20, which indicates that the sediment load in the lake is much higher. At the same time, other optical constituents are also there. So the right extreme, the third plot indicates the remote sensing reflectance data of the optical constituents. Remote sensing reflectance data is a measure of the spectral value of that particular water, which clearly tell us what is there in that particular water body. And at the same time, we can have in situ measurement and develop a ternary plot, which is the first figure, which is a triangle. So we can have the in situ measurements, we can have the citizen science measurement, and we can have the remote sensing reflectance measurement constructed from the in situ data. This will give us an idea on how the water is behaving. Based on the water color, what is the water constituent or optical constituent present in the water. Now, this ternary plot is better explained like this. You have mostly three components. One component is the phytoplankton, which is green in color. The other component is the total suspended sediments, which is brown in color. And the third component is colored dissolved organic matter or yellow substances. Depending upon the type of the constituent substance available in the water, it will move in this particular triangle. So if the triangle is moving towards its apex, it indicates that there is more phytoplankton. If it is coming to the right bottom apex, it is indicating the suspended material. And if it is coming to the left bottom apex, it is indicating the yellow substances. So these are the three major absorbing components in bio-optics. So when we study the lake, the northern zone of the lake, for example, to show like how the brown color or the detrital matter is creating the turbidity. We studied the northern zone. Northern zone is known for in the particular lake what we are studying. This northern zone is having the Cochin port, and because of the presence of the harbor, which is getting shallower and shallower because of the degradation what is happening because of the siltation and other things. There is regular dredging activities, and there are a lot of sediments available, and it is becoming brown because of the presence of the detrital matter. Along with that, there is a lot of phytoplankton. You can see the dominant phytoplankton seen here. Some of the images are shown. And this phytoplankton along with the detritus give a brownish green color. You can see the images by the citizen scientists, and accordingly the ternary plot, the triangle also indicates like it is mostly driven by detritus. But occasionally you can see a pink small triangle inside the big triangle, which indicates that there is some presence of phytoplankton also sometimes deciding the absorption budget in this particular region. So we can get such information. The central zone of the lake, the middle zone of the lake, the area is indicated in the circle in the first plot, the very first figure in the left hand side. It indicates the central zone of the Vembanad lake. It is having an absorption budget. The lake as such is dominated by detritus, there is no doubt, but at the same time, this particular zone is having lot of absorption in phytoplankton. The water is very much stagnant, it is eutrophic, and occasional blooms are observed, and because of this presence of these blooms and the major community dominant structure of the phytoplankton, the color is coming mostly like greenish. So this is indicated in the absorption budget also. Now coming to the inshore water, just to indicate like how the yellow substances or colored dissolved organic matter behaves, I just wanted to show the ternary plots where the phyto as well as the detrital contribution is much less, and yellow substances are there. It looks how it looks like in the lake is mostly shown in the images here, which is from the freshwater zones of the lake. But this particular ternary plot and the phytoplankton which is shown here is from the inshore waters, which is close by the Vembanad lake. Now, exactly how the spectral reflectance behave is shown in this particular slide, where you can see two types of water. One is greenish in color, other is bluish in color. The blue water is devoid of the optical constituents. You can see in the table that the colored dissolved organic matter, the yellow substance, the chlorophyll on the total suspended sediment is much less in the blue water, which is sp05. Whereas the green water, which is sp00, it is having more of the colored dissolved organic matter, chlorophyll, and TSM. So you can see how the spectral reflectance is different. For the blue water, it is indicated as the blue, and the green water, it is indicated as the green. So you can see how the spectral reflectance is changing. So the water has got its own spectral reflectance, and it changes with the type of the optical constituents, whether it is phyto, detritus, and other things. Depending upon the optical constituents, the spectral reflectance varies. This is a typical example how we can classify them. The concentration of phytoplankton is more, it is greenish in color. The concentration of turbidity or total suspended material is more, it is brown in color. The concentration of the optical density depends upon the concentration of this constituents. So based on the absorption, we can calculate or estimate the based on the optical density, we can estimate the concentration. So the concentration and absorption is clearly indicated here. The greenish water is having a dominant green color phytoplankton, and the brown water is having the brownish total suspended sediment, some phytoplankton, some colored dissolved organic matter also. All components are seen. It's a complex structure. So the first is an indicator of what we call as case 1 water, and the second is indicator of case 2 waters. Now, what citizen science is bringing in? When I told about spectral reflectance, the optical constants present in water, and there is something called satellite remote sensing. We have got satellite remote sensing data. For measuring such water bodies, we utilize satellite remote sensing data also. But the problem with satellite remote sensing data is that it is not available all the time. But sometimes when the satellite path is there, that data is generated. But again, it has got the interference from the atmosphere. It has got its own issues with respect to the different types of water bodies. So we have to generate an algorithm based on the in situ data. And all the time we don't have this data sets. There is something missing in this. Even though if we have some in situ data, and we cannot have the continuous in situ data also, because scientifically it is going to be very costly if you have to take the in situ data all the time. So we use satellite data, validating it with the in situ data and telling that satellite data is as good as in situ data, and we use it. But there is something missing. We don't have the real-time assessment. And so as to have this, citizen science is carving out a niche by itself by bridging the research gap between satellite monitoring and in situ sampling for real-time assessment of water bodies. So here comes the relevance of the citizen science data. We have some good products like in this particular study itself, the TurboAqua application is giving us water surface image. I told about the different type of the image of the water color. User selected, the person who is doing, he is also telling like what is the color code of that particular water body and some metadata also. The spectral information what we get is the hue color angle and Forel color. And the 3D printed Secchi disk, which is there, will provide us with Secchi depth, water color compared to FU scale at half Secchi depth, which is indicative of the spectral information, which is water transparency and semi-empirical algorithms. So this information, which is coming from the citizen science scientists or citizen science network, that will be a gap bridging mechanism. So such type of data, how it is useful in studying some cases in Vembanad. This is a very interesting incident. There were 2 flat demolitions which happened in Vembanad very recently. You can see the first flat getting demolished, and you can see the beautiful scene of Vembanad and the Cochin city, like the aerial view of the city and how the flats got demolished. This is very recently. The demolition happened in 11th January 2020 and 12th January 2020. This was because these 2 flats violated the coastal regulation zone, and the apex court told like it is harmful for the environment and it has to be demolished. So this demolition of civil structures, it can have some environmental impact immediately, because it is a concrete structure and some of the concrete waste can fall into the river. Even if the waste is not falling, with precise explosion, sometimes the type of dust which is created there, it can affect the ecology. So our interest was to see like whether our existing mechanism can do some support in assessing the environmental quality. Unfortunately, the station in which we had the data was the station 7, but other areas the data was not available. So we conducted some measurements in addition to the measurements in station 7, using the existing system of social citizen science network. We used both the TurboAqua app and Secchi disk and did some additional measurements. We did the measurements from the different stations, and the station locations are also indicated. In addition, we did salinity, DO, and pH as normal scientists do. So salinity, dissolved oxygen, pH, how they are varying, Secchi depth, how it is varying, the water color, how it is varying, we could study. There was high salinity because of the alkaline leakage as well as the hydrate during the measurements. The dissolved oxygen was low in the second week, but increased progressively with settlement of suspended matter. And the pH also significantly high during all 5 weeks because of the leaching of the hydroxyl ion and Secchi depth and water clarity. It was very low initially, but improved further during the 4th and 5th week. And the FU color, as the turbidity was more, the FU color level was also very high. It was ranging around 18 to 20 initially, but improved to around 16 in the 5th week, which is normal to this lake. So relative changes during the 5 weeks, we could study from our earlier data, which was in the station 7 and with the remaining stations also. So significant variation was there initially. The second depth variations also was much evident. Smaller changes in pH, but the smaller changes in pH can have got some physiological ramifications. And the hydrodynamic conditions in the lake, the tides, currents, and freshwater influx help the lake to purify itself. And finally, we could see like the remnant water quality was changes was relatively short-lived. So this is one case study. What are we doing further with the Citizen Science Network, and what was the main aim? That was a offshoot of the study. What is the real aim of the study? We had a major project funded by the Department of Science and Technology, led by Dr. Shubha at Plymouth Marine Laboratory and Dr. Anas as the Indian counterpart. The project name is Revival. And in this, we are trying to see like how the cholera population is environmentally linked, and whether we can see this cholera population water quality using satellite remote sensing. So in Revival, our strategy is to see like how the Vembanad Lake optical constituents are changing and how the cholera colonies available in the lake system is changing with the changing optical constituents. And finally, our interest is to come out with some operational advisory which can give warning to the people who are staying in the vicinity of the Vembanad Lake, whether there is going to be some cholera outbreaks or whether the cholera population is increasing, what sort of control mechanisms the local population has to take, and which areas are vulnerable. So such information can be generated out of this data, for which citizen science data is from the stakeholder, which is a major asset. So we are studying at lab the different type of interactions the optical constituents are having, and the optical constituent data in real time is coming from the citizen science network. So this citizen science network indirectly is helping us in predicting or operationalizing cholera-based advisories. This is one such example. This can be utilized in multiple ways. If the turbidity is interfering with the lake water quality, the tourist boat owners or the people who are operating houseboats, they will be interested in knowing what is the turbidity of the lake. So they have come up. So that the type of water quality, what is there at the lake, it is having a lot of links to the routine livelihood of the people who are residing in and around the lake. So this data is going to be very useful. So one example is in the Revival project, we are trying to see cholera advisories, and there are a lot of many applications which can be generated out of the citizen science data. One more important thing, what we are coming up with the citizen science network, many from the citizen science network is attending this presentation. We have come up with a mobile app known as Cleanse, in which we are trying to see like the drinking water quality or the sanitation requirement available in and around the lake. So the coastal population will be sharing such information on daily basis using this app, and this can help us in indirectly knowing what is the sanitation level of the villages or the villagers, and what is the type of water quality which are available for the villages. So this is one thing which we are trying to address, and we are coming up with a web-based application which we are trying to see the sanitation protocols followed in case of an outbreak of an epidemic like COVID and other things. So this is one advanced thing which we are thinking for working with the citizen science. And this is not at all possible if we don't have the network, and we have 13 colleges with a lot of stakeholders in and around the lake supporting us in these activities. And I would like to thank everyone specifically. You can see the network of the colleges in and around Vembanad Lake supporting us in this activity, generating a lot of citizen science data, which is in turn helping us in monitoring the lake and its environmental and water quality as well as other things. And this support has to be continued, and we have to go ahead with more and more applications which will be academically enriching for the people or faculty members as well as the students who are involved in this. At the same time, it is feeding us with a good data set, a long-term data set, which is going to support environmental monitoring of Vembanad Lake. And this was possible because I had a strong foundation in my students who are working with me. These are the scholars. Among them, Shreya is not directly attached with me. She is attached with Nansen Research Center. But with my deputation happening to SARC Agriculture Center, now presently I am based at Dhaka in Bangladesh. My entire lab, I called it GG lab, Green St. George lab, but now my lab is mostly maintained by my colleagues, Dr. Mini and Dr. Somi, who are based at Seemafarai, and immense support from Dr. Nandini Menon, who is taking care of the entire project and the technical part, and even dealing with the day-to-day administration and discussing with the students. Almost on a daily basis, I am in touch with her. So GG Lab is now getting modified into a multiple faculty-driven laboratory where my students are getting benefited at the same time. They are supporting me even though from a distance. This work was conceived with the support of Professor Dr. Trevor Platt, who was the first visiting professorship from Partnership on Ocean Global Observation, along with the funding from the NF Nippon Foundation. Really, that training in 2004-2005 period, from December to March, that was the mentorship what he has given, and rest of my career is based on what support I received during this particular training. That time I was with the National Institute of Oceanography. So Professor Platt is not with us anymore, but his wisdom is guiding us to take up this further. And this was, as I told, there was a lot of support from Plymouth Marine Laboratory. The lead principal investigator, Dr. Shubha, she is also in touch with me on almost on daily basis. We are trying to come out with the best science based on the project what we are doing. Robert Brevin, and his team is also supporting. He's presently at the University of Exeter, but when the project started, he was with PML. And ample support from my principal investigator, Anas Abdulaziz. And I told about Nandini ma'am, Somi ma'am, and Mini ma'am, who is supporting my lab, supporting my students, and the other activities, the administrative, technical, science, everything. Thanks, all of you. And it has been immensely developed. The lab, the structure, the network, everything has been immensely developed with the financial support from different organizations. I profusely thank my director, Dr. A. Gopalakrishnan, the director of Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute, and the support I received from SARC Agriculture Center, SAC. They also support me in continuing some of the works. Even though I have my own priorities here, I am contributing some of my time apart from that to go ahead with the already committed scientific ventures. So I thank my students, thank my network, and thank Nano and Pogo for giving me this platform. Thanks once again.
Thanks a lot, Grishan, for a rather very inspiring and stimulating presentation. And I would like also, I think, to thank also all your collaborators, your colleagues, and especially your students that have been engaged in this project based in the Vembanad Lake. So I think we can all learn from your work here on how to engage, especially the youngest, so students or college students, to draw them into these kind of citizen science projects and make them also share not only the technology, that I really like the approach that you are using. So coupling the SERB Aqua app with the 3D printed Secchi disk, which is a rather, I think, innovative approach. And I also find it very interesting, the emphasis that you put on the advantages of having a great scientific project as this one in the Lake Vembanad, based on the citizen science approach, which has the advantage, at least two main advantages, of making it easier to measure in distant areas, and also facilitate, and this is very key for our global project, Nano DOP, so facilitate long time series in extended areas. So yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Grishan. And I'll give now the participants, please don't hesitate if you have any question. I think I saw some comments some questions in the comment section coming up.
Yeah.
We can start with that maybe. And if any of the participants want to speak up, please do. Thank you again.
Yeah, I was seeing a question from Rasik. Rasik was asking me how long the effect of land demolition persisted in the water column of Cochin Estuary. So as on, we have measurements up to 5 weeks, and within 5 weeks, it was almost coming to its normalcy, but still the issues with the pH was still there, but it will take some time. There is a lot of self-purification happening because of the tidal exchange, the currents and other things. So it was, we definitely measured the pH. Carla was asking that we definitely measured the pH, and the total alkalinity measurement, the water samples, we have measured mostly DO. I'm not sure like whether we have the total alkalinity measurement. Dr. Nandini will be able to suffice that, whether we did the total alkalinity measurements.
Grinson, may I interfere?
Yeah.
Yeah, Carla, we didn't measure the total alkalinity. We just measured the pH. And so we were not able to assess the buffering capacity of the lake, how well it could buffer the, or it could neutralize the increasing pH. We just measured the pH only because our aim was to apply the citizen science measurements or use simple measurements to get a better result for such a like an environmental impact study or to assess the water quality using simple instruments. That was the purpose. And so we couldn't measure. It was using just mobile, portable pH meter, thermometer, salinometer, and then the Secchi disc. That was the only things which we used. So other measurements were not possible.
I have a question. I'm curious about the Secchi device on costs for producing them. Are you able to print them back in India, or you have to order from someone?
Oh, okay. Now, as for now, we are getting the Secchi discs from PML because we have an ongoing project in which PML is a partner. So we get it from PML, and the design, everything is available, and Bob shared it. So it is possible to do the 3D. It's a simple 3D printing, and we have to have the sticker there. So since we were partners and PML is supplying, we have not bothered so far, but definitely that can be tried upon.
Lika, I think Bob has just left. He had another meeting at 4 o'clock. But they have put it on Amazon. So you can buy it from Amazon. I'm not sure exactly. It costs you maybe about £10.
Okay.
And the 3D printing program is probably also available in the paper that was published.
Mm-hmm. And then anyone can download the app and starting to collaborate?
The app, when you are transmitting the data using the app, it will be coming to the server of Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute. So in case if you are, the app can be downloaded and the information can be transmitted, but it will be coming to our server. So in case you have to retrieve it, then you have to approach us.
Okay, can I do it here in Portugal?
It is possible. It is possible. We can think of doing it.
It's Bob here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Bob. Yes.
Yeah, I'm still on. I've got to whiz off, as Shubha mentioned, to another meeting. Just a quick point on the mini Secchi. I have just put in the chat a link to a paper we published last year, and in that paper are all the STL files and the instructions on how to build the mini Secchi disc. If anyone's interested in doing that, and of course we'd be happy to help out with that. At the moment, in collaboration obviously with PML, a lot of the mini Secchi discs were produced actually at a grammar school in Kent in the UK. We had a lot of school children helping out to build them and put them together. At the moment, we have capacity to build some more, and we are trying to reduce down costs as much as we can to make them very affordable. But it's a very iterative process, and it was really great to get involved with this Revival project and use the resources within that project to help tune and develop this device.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Shrupa. There's another question on the chat for you, Grinton. It's from Sabine John. I have doubt regarding the spatial interpolation map for the SECI color code. I have found a strong difference, the coloring shade in the eastern and western bank of Alappuzha region. Could be the reason? Could that be the reason?
Regarding the spatial interpolation of map for CG color code, I have found strong difference in the color shade in the eastern and western bank of the Alappuzha region. Okay. Share the slide. Or else, Sibin, like basically we have the comparison of the in situ as well as we have the comparison. Oh, you are asking only about the color code, or Sibin is there?
It's maybe Sabine can add.
Yeah, sir. I'm just asking that what was the difference between the color shade happened, because those regions are having the bathymetry is uniform, approximately less than 3 meters only. So why could be the reason here is the color code is in the western bank is brownish shade and light, very light color in the eastern bank. So.
Okay, you are asking for the course. Basically, we have not gone for such details, like why the particular water body is having the particular color. It may be because of the type of ecological characteristics of that region, or maybe because of some other reasons which are contributing to the differences in the optical constituents. Now, as on now, what I have shown is just the data what we have received through our citizen science network, and I have just plotted it. So now to look into these reasons, probably if you are interested in studying this, you have to look into each particular locality wise, the type of data available, and see the nitty-gritties available in those particular areas by going to that region, doing a more relevant scientific study. But in general, now this is just the data received. The average data received from that region is plotted. So okay. That's it.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Nice presentation, sir.
Thank you.
I just might have not a question, maybe a comment regarding the use of this SECI disk or mini SECI disk with the mobile app. Related to our project, the global project, as you know, now we have 12 measurement stations, and we have at least 5 of those stations that are measuring in lagoons or in river embranchment into the sea, or in coastal lagoon where the water is really rather shallow. And we do have, for example, our site in Tunisia, the Bugurara Lagoon. We have the turbidity, especially during the spring and summertime, is very important. So I think I want to ask, would it be possible to make these, find somehow a means to make these SECI disks and the mobile app available for the participants, the project participants that can use it to study basic water quality parameter?
Yeah, Hussein, it's a nice suggestion, and partly it is supplementing what Lekha was telling. So now this equipment is available at much cheaper price. It's costing only £10, so you can order it at Amazon and get it. So that is the easiest way to get the equipment. Otherwise, if you are interested in more number of SECI disks, as Bob said, the entire protocol is available for manufacturing it at your place. So that resolves the first component. Second component is establishing the network for doing the measurement. That has to be done locally. And the third component is the mobile app. Mobile app is freely downloadable from the Google Play Store. Now the missing link is like the data which you are sending in the mobile app, it is coming to the server of Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute. And there, now my guys are removing the outliers. So suddenly if a data is coming from Portugal, that will be seen as something wrong and they will remove it as an outlier. So we have to have it trained, and it's possible. Definitely it's possible because there is an established network and we should utilize it. And our main aim is to extend it. My initial aim was to extend it to different parts of India to do the measurements and then globally. But now all of a sudden this is giving a platform where we can start the global network immediately. I'm happy to do that, and let me discuss, because now I am not presently at Cochin. Let Dr. Nandini, Dr. Somi, Dr. Anas, and others, and my scholars are also listening to this. My team is listening to this. So you can discuss the feasibility of doing this at the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute. Of course, I will talk with the director also, and we can do it. Great. And in case of if it has to be rechannelized to a server differently, that is also possible. We can have a global app. In case of there is some technical difficulties coming, it can be done. That's not a big deal. I'm there to support. No worries.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Dr. Nandini, who is the Indian coordinator, she can supplement.
Thank you.
Yes, Nusan, let's go for that. So we'll make the necessary modifications in the app and let's make it functional globally.
I have a more technical question then, Grinson. In one of your slides, you showed some sampling from SecDep from scientists, and then lots of from the citizen science. Were they compared? Did they show similar numbers, or is there a difference? You know what I mean? I know Sec is kind of subjective, but still.
No, we did the comparison, and that plot also was shown. Should I share the slide again, or
yes,
you can? Yeah. Is this the one? Yes, this is the comparison.
Yeah, the 21, I guess. Slide 21.
Yeah. Are you able to see it?
Yeah.
So from the SecDep, we have calculated the turbidity. So the second figure, the middle figure in this plot, is the turbidity calculated from the CTD measurements. And the third figure is the measurements from citizen science. So you can see like how closely good they look like.
Yes, very good. Fantastic. Anyone have more questions to Dr. George? Well, I take that as a no. Grinson, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. I think I slightly overshot the time. I didn't see it.
No, it was okay. We had a little bit of delay on started, so I didn't want it to disturb you, and it was such an interesting presentation. I think everyone understands.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was great. I am delighted.
A little bit more.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Thanks a lot.
Anything for Pogo and Nano.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so thank you everyone for joining us. As I mentioned in the beginning and through the chat box, this meeting will be made available later on Pogo's YouTube channel. You can contact us at nf-pogo-alumni.org or via our Facebook or social media too. And that's it. I hope everyone enjoyed this as much as I did, and I wish you all a good weekend.